Before the world drew borders, before ships arrived with flags and guns, before the word Africa was spoken by foreign tongues, there was a continent that taught the world how to live. They will tell you Africa had no history. They will tell you Africa had no civilization. They will tell you Africa waited to be discovered. But tonight, we return to a time they erased. A time of empires richer than kings. A time of science before Europe learned to read. A time when Africa ruled itself. This is Africa before colonization. Africa is not just a continent. Africa is where humanity began. Over 300,000 years ago, long before pyramids or palaces, Africa gave birth to modern humans, Homo sapiens. Here, early Africans shaped stone tools with precision. They mastered fire. They formed language, culture, and community. While much of the world still wandered in silence, Africa was learning how to survive, how to think, how to organize. Civilization did not arrive in Africa, it rose from Africa. Along the banks of the Nile rose Kemet, the Black Land. Africans built monuments so advanced they still confuse modern engineers. They mastered geometry, astronomy, medicine, and architecture. They mapped the stars. They performed surgeries. They created calendars aligned with the heavens. The pyramids were not built by slaves of ignorance. They were designed by African scientists, engineers, and mathematicians. Women owned land. Law governed society. Knowledge was sacred. This was African civilization, thousands of years before Europe's rise. South of Egypt rose Nubia and Kush, African kingdoms so powerful they ruled Egypt itself. The black pharaohs of the 25th dynasty restored temples, revived culture, and governed with discipline and wisdom. They controlled vast gold reserves that funded ancient economies. Africa was not poor. Africa was powerful enough to rule empires. Across the Sahara, powerful empires emerged. The Ghana Empire dominated gold trade for centuries. Gold was taxed by weight. Trade routes were protected. Law and order prevailed. Kings ruled with councils. Merchants traveled safely. Africa understood economics long before capitalism had a name. Then came Mali, and a man history could not ignore. Mansa Musa, the richest man who ever lived. In 1324, his journey to Mecca redistributed so much gold it collapsed economies across North Africa and the Middle East. But Mali was not just rich, it was intelligent. Courts of law, engineers, architects, scholars. Gold built cities, but knowledge built civilization. Timbuktu was not a legend. It housed over 200,000 manuscripts on medicine, astronomy, law, mathematics, and philosophy. Scholars traveled from across the world to study here. While Europe burned books, Africa preserved knowledge. Africa was not uneducated. Africa was educating the world. Songhai became the largest empire in African history. Askia Muhammad established structured governance, civil service, tax systems, judges, military academies. This was statecraft. This was governance. This was African modernity before modern times. Across Africa, iron technology developed independently. In Nok, iron was smelted as early as 1000 BC. In southern Africa, Great Zimbabwe rose. Massive stone cities built without mortar, still standing today. These were not huts, they were engineered urban centers. Along the Indian Ocean, African city-states thrived. Kilwa, Mombasa, and Zanzibar traded with China, India, and Arabia. African sailors navigated the seas using stars. Africa was connected to the world long before Europeans arrived. African societies governed through councils of elders. Kings ruled with accountability. Bad leaders were removed. Justice focused on restoration, not punishment. Community mattered more than conquest. African spirituality studied balance between humans, nature, and the universe. Medicine used plants modern science still studies today. Astronomy guided farming. Africa understood life, not just power. Then ships appeared, not to discover, but to conquer. To justify invasion, Africa's story had to be erased. They said Africa had no civilization, no history, no knowledge. But ruins remain, manuscripts remain, truth remains. Africa was interrupted, and every African story told today is an act of resistance. They tried to bury Africa's past, not knowing it was a seed. This is not the end of Africa's story. Now you know.